Hi friends, welcome back to Quartz Books and Body Care. I did just post my video for my April empties, and this video is going to be about books. This is the books that I read in April. I did get through 4 books, which is not too bad for me. On average, I I usually read about 3 to 5 books a month, so this was, fit into my average. But I think for May, I'm gonna try to amp that up a little bit. I have already finished 1 book, and I'm almost finished with number 2. And yeah, so I think I might be able to get through more than 5 this month, but we'll see. Let's go ahead and talk about the books I read in April. Again, I apologize if I have to clear my throat or cough or pause to cough or anything like that, because if you watched my last video, I did say that I had been sick for a good part of April, and I still get the little trigger in my throat that makes me have to cough. So, yeah, so I apologize for that, but I wanted to go ahead and try to get as many videos filmed today as I can, because I have a little moment to myself. So, yeah. So I'm sorry if you get bored of seeing me in my Ariana Grande shirt. but yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the 4 books I read this month. The first 2 are a series, or a duology, if you will, by Rachel Gillig. This is One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. This duology was outstanding. Let me go ahead and say the first book, One Dark Window, I do use Goodreads to track my reading and to rate books. Unfortunately, on Goodreads, you can't give half or quarter stars, but I did rate this 4 stars. I felt like it was moving a little slow at the beginning. Not that I was bored with it necessarily. It was just, I think sometimes you start reading a book and maybe it's just not the right book at the right moment, and your mind kind of is thinking about other things. So I think that probably it was just like my mindset. I just wasn't into it as much, but I was enjoying it. But then probably about the halfway point, I was really into it. So I did give it 4 stars. However, the second book, Two Twisted Crowns, I gave 5 stars. It was excellent, and because I gave it 5 stars, I felt like this kind of deserves more than 4, so I'd probably give this maybe a 4.5. But I felt like by the end of this book, it was the perfect example of a story that, while it was unique and exciting, it was also, I felt like every character and everything in the story had a purpose and a place. And by the end, everything kind of fit into its little slot perfectly, and then tied up in a pretty bow, if that makes sense. So sometimes when you're reading a fantasy story, especially with the world building and all that, and you're like, okay, let's get on with it. Sometimes even by the end, even if you liked it, you kind of feel like, well, what about this character, or what about this? And you have like questions and little holes in the story that you feel like need to be filled and satisfied. I didn't feel that way with this. I felt like everything was like, oh yes, that's why that's that way, and that's why that character did this, and everything had a purpose. And I just absolutely loved that about it. It was my favorite thing about it. So I would highly recommend this story. Okay, so this is called this Shepherd King duology. I don't want to say why it is called that because I feel like that would be a spoiler, but I'm just going to tell you that it is about a young woman named Elspeth who has magic, and she lives in this town called Blunder. This is one of those stories that's very unique and complicated, and it's very hard to just give you kind of a synopsis of it. I will just say that the young woman, the FMC in this, named Elspeth, has absorbed some magic. There are cards called Providence cards that are basically another character in the story, because they are an intricate part of the story. So to explain all about the Providence cards and the dark magic and everything, it's really, I would just give you the whole story. So I just have to say that I highly recommend this if you are into fantasy. It is not heavily, I guess I would call this a romantasy, but it's not a romantasy like ACOTAR or Fourth Wing like that. It's really more about the story and the magic, and the romance is just a little bit kind of secondary, if that makes sense. But I absolutely loved this duology, and highly recommend if you're into that sort of thing. All right, the next book I finished was the second book in this trilogy by Kelly Armstrong. This is called The Awakening. The first book was called The Summoning, which I read last year. However, I had that book for so long. I had it, I want to say, since it came, well, maybe not since it came out, but if you recall in the 2000s, when a lot of the YA kind of paranormal series were super popular, you know, obviously you had Twilight, any of the Cassandra Clare books like the Mortal Instruments, any of that kind of stuff. You had Vampire Diaries, Vampire Academy, and all of that, those YA series. This was one of them. And I want to say this was called Darkest Powers. It doesn't say on the book, but I think the series was called Darkest Powers. This is about a young girl named Chloe. She's 15. And in the first book, she had gone to live at a place called Lyle House. And it was because she started seeing ghosts. And they tried to make it seem like it was, she had, you know, some mental problems or things like that. But come to find out, all of the kids at Lyle House have some sort of power. And at the end of that book, she and some other kids had tried to escape and run away. And she and another girl got caught and were taken to this place called the Edison Group. And she learns that she and the other young kids with special powers were genetically modified. And she tries to get away at the beginning of this book. So this, I would say, is sort of the essential second book in a trilogy, where you have the first book where you meet the characters and you learn the story. And then the second book is really kind of like that bridge between the first book and the third book. I would compare it a lot to the Powerless series, where in Fearless, it's pretty much she's just trying to get back to Ilya. That's kind of what this book is like. The first book, The Summoning, I think I gave 4 stars. And this one, I ended up giving 3 3/4 stars. I did enjoy it, but like I said, it was just, they're all like trying to get away kind of thing. I did enjoy it. I'm already almost, I probably have like maybe 100 pages left of book 3, maybe even less than that. So I am enjoying the third book a lot more, but like I said, this is, you know, essential to get they get to the third book. So it's definitely YA. They're teenagers, but it's, you know, it's still a good time. I enjoyed it. And then the last book that I read was from the Powerless trilogy, but this is the little novella called Powerful. And really this, I think, is meant to be read after Powerless, because what this is the story of Adina and Makoto. And if you read Powerless, you know who those characters are. I did like their story, getting a little, you know, backstory on them. And of course, if you read Powerless, you know how it ends. And this ends the same way. It's just from a different point of view. So I did enjoy this. I think I still gave it, I think I gave this 3 stars, maybe 3.5. I listened to the audio while I read along, and I wasn't a fan of the narrators for this one. I felt like the girl that did the voice of Adina, she had a really hard time doing male voices, and I didn't really even feel like there was that much of a difference between Adina's voice and Mac's voice from her point of view. Like, she didn't try to do it a lot deeper, which sometimes can be annoying when people do that, but I just felt like I had a hard time unless I was reading along. If I was just listening and like doing chores or whatever, I was like, wait, who said that? You know? Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that. And then the guy who does the voice for Makoto's point of view, or Mac, I guess he's really called Mac in the story, but his real name is Makoto. He sounded really young, and I know this is YA and he's supposed to be young, but he didn't sound like how I would imagine Mac sounding. In fact, there were several times where he calls Adina honey, and it sounded like he was uncomfortable saying that, like he wasn't the kind of guy who would say honey. And it was kind of cringy a little bit for that reason. So I do recommend this book if you have read the series, or at least have read the first book, you know, because it's part of it, and you know, you should read it. You don't have to, but you know, I feel like if I'm going to read a series, I want to read all the books, but it's not essential. And if you do read it, I wouldn't recommend the audio just for that reason. But you know, if you can get past that, I guess, you know, you can. But anyway, and then my cover is, I think this was like a special edition version because it has the sprayed edges. I think the original version has a white cover, and I think it's smaller, like the book is smaller. I wanted this one because it's the same size as the other books. But yeah, and I will say that already this month, it will be in next month's video, but I have already read the other novella, which is called Fearful, and that one I like a lot better, and the narrators are a lot better. So, but we'll talk more about that next time. Anyway, that's the books that I read in April. I will also be making a video of the books I plan to read in May. Hopefully, you know, my May hopefuls. And yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know if you've read any of these books. And also, if you have any recommendations for me, let me know. I do like, obviously, I like fantasy, romantasy, but also like just regular, you know, cutesy romance. I like thrillers. So if you have any recommendations for me, I'm always open to that. Anyway, have a nice day, guys. Bye-bye.